A well-lived life is a journey of consciously crafting the best version of oneself. Wellness and joy do not occur by chance. They are fostered by manifesting one's true light with courage and strength. Overall being occurs by creating a respectful, aware relationship with oneself and with others. That's the motto of today's guest. She's a clinical psychologist, author, consultant, advocate, and speaker. Her highly acclaimed books, Joy from Fear and Aging Joyfully, plus a newest title, Dating Smart, or Date Smart, sorry, offer life-changing insights and wisdom-filled tips to help readers create positive and purpose-driven lives. Welcome to the show, Dr. Carla Manly. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderfully. Thank you.
Thank you so much
Thank
for.
you.
Sorry.
No, thank you for having me, Toby. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Mirror Talk podcast. I sincerely love your motto. A well-lived life is a journey of consciously crafting the best version of oneself. How did you come up with this motto, and how has it been the journey? As now has the journey been for you? Crafting the best version of your own life.
That's a deep question, Toby. And where I came up with my motto, I love to write, I love to live. And through my life, I have learned that early on, I was raised in a Catholic family. I'm the ninth of 10 children. So I was raised in a way that you listen to your elders, you do what you're told, you follow the path that is set before you. And so I was guided and pressed to be an attorney. And it was in law school that I realized I'm not meant to be an attorney. I'm meant to do something else. So I broke tradition, and my father was very displeased and obtained my master's
Mm.
in counseling psychology, and then went into, because life took me on a different path and I needed to pay bills and do all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So I ended up working for years in the investment field and realized very soon that I was doing it to make other people happy, to make money for other people. And money is not one of my priorities in life. Happiness is.
Mm.
And so it took me a long time to realize that what I needed to do was completely break with other people's expectations and find my own. And so it was actually in doctoral school um, that I, for the first time, met people who felt like my people.
Mm.
People who spoke the same and thought the same and were after the same things, had the same priorities. And it was there that I really found my people and started really exploring who I was as an individual. And through that process, which is where my first book came from, my first book, Joy from Fear, was actually the result of my fear research, which
Mm.
was to understand if the fears that held me back in life were similar to other people's fears.
Mm.
And so I developed both a qualitative and a quantitative research tool to investigate other people's fears.
Mm.
And so basically, what I found was that people who live in a very fear based mindset, like I was raised in, tend to be self limiting. They're limited because of their worries about what other people might do or displeasing other people. And so, what I realized through time, lots of research, lots of self discovery, is that each one of us has a different path in life. And when we learn to look inside, to really work at polishing who we are and pay attention to who we are and what our code is,
Mm.
and living in loving, healthy ways, we tend to slowly but surely take steps in the right direction that help us to shine and
Mm.
radiate as no other person on the planet can do.
Yes, yes. And how did you do that? How did you take time to pay attention to who you truly are, to study yourself, to know, okay, this is who I am and this is what I am meant to be or to do.
Another fabulous question, Toby. And we live in a world that is very externally oriented,
Mm,
where we say we're so busy and we don't have time for self exploration or self discovery. And to be fair, there are people, and I've been there at times in my life, where you are working so hard to make ends meet, to make your mortgage payment, to pay the bills, to make everybody happy, that self discovery, self exploration, what? It seems like a luxury, or tell, what are you talking about? I'm
yeah.
just trying to live, right? But for
Yes.
many of us, we can move past that state
Mm,
by really looking at our priorities
mm,
and realizing if I have time for my hobbies,
mm,
if I have time to watch television or, doom scroll on the internet for 5 hours or whatever, I
mm,
can find more balance and make time for me.
mm,
And Carl Jung, I have a quote in my office that says, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And I'm a Jungian trained psychologist. And so
yes.
what that means is I really listen to a lot of Carl Jung's principles. I also have my own principles, but I'm very much guided by Jungian psychology, which is all about looking in. And so for me, and I work with people where it's about the practice of learning to pause, learning, and it's a constant journey. I can get, on full speed and forget to turn inward. And so it's that practice of always coming back to center. It's one of the reasons I love yoga. Yes, it's physical exercise, but it's also spiritual exercise. Spiritual exercise to remember that it's okay to be in discomfort. It's okay to sit and just be. And it's okay because we're in such a externally oriented world again, where we're taught to pay attention to what other people think of us,
Mm,
pay attention to how much we accumulate,
mm,
to listening to what other people want. Yet if we turn inside and consciously come back and say, what is the next best step for me?
mm,
Then we automatically show up in the world in a better way, because it is that cycle, right? If I'm doing something that is truly good for me, I will naturally be having a positive effect on everyone in my world.
true. That's very true. That's very, very true. And I guess this is what motivated you to take this holistic and the body, mind, spirit approach to your services or to psychology that you do. Is that right?
Yes, I am very much body, mind, spirit oriented, because being body, mind, spirit oriented doesn't mean you need to be religious, or it simply means that you need to become in touch with your essence. We can call spirit essence, right?
Yes.
So for me, whether it's, like I said, I was raised Catholic, but I bring in definitely elements of Buddhism into my life because I really appreciate that just being way of energy. And so
Mm,
I also think if we just look at the body, mind, spirit, what we think, right, affects what we do. And what we think also affects our bodies.
mm,
So if we look at it in a very simple level, if I'm afraid of having a conversation with you,
yeah.
I am going to, my fear is going to come up. I'm
Mm,
going to put my body into a fight or flight state,
mm,
raising adrenaline and cortisol in my body.
yes.
And in short bursts, fear like that is meant to serve us. It's meant for us to look at a threat and deal with a threat.
Mm,
But we're often living in fear
mm,
day in and day out. So, of course, in that simple example, we can see how me being afraid to talk to you or to anyone else,
mm,
if I stay in that anxious or fearful state, I am keeping elevated levels of cortisol and adrenaline in my body, and they're not meant to be there. So, it's destructive not just for my emotional and mental health, it is also destructive for my physical health. It is also destructive for my spiritual health. Why? Because I'm not staying here in the present.
mm,
I'm not just enjoying my conversation with Toby or navigating my way through it. I'm missing you. I'm not
Yes.
even seeing you because I'm so afraid, right? So
Yeah.
if instead I just say, Toby has good intentions, I have good intentions, I'm
Mm.
just going to be here and be present for whatever shows up,
Yeah.
and everything will be fine. It changes the dynamics. That's freedom, by the way.
Oh, freedom journey podcast.
Freedom has just walked in. He's my giant schnauzer, and he's actually, it's really, really great that he walked in just now because he is a reminder to me of being present and being balanced
Mm.
because I can get very work focused. I have so many people I want to help and so much I want to do that
Yes.
I can lose track of the importance of being present for play.
Mm.
And he will often come to me. He knows just when I finish a session, and he will come and he will bat at my arm and push my arm up like, Mom, it is time to take a break. We are going to go and you're going to throw the ball for me at least 3 times or something
Yes.
like that. And
Yes.
so he is actually a force of balance in my life.
Mm.
And so that's an important piece to realize, is that we don't always have perfect self balance.
Mm.
Sometimes it comes in the form of a partner or a pet, or a reminder on your phone, take a minute to stay balanced.
Yes.
And we have become, because we've become so divorced from
Mm.
nature,
Mm.
where our very recent ancestors spent most of every day, and now most of our days are spent sitting.
True.
And so, again, that's part of the body, mind, spirit, that if we allow ourselves to be guided when something calls us and
Mm.
not see it as an irritation and not say, oh, freedom, go away, don't bother me. But if
Mm.
we say, thank you for the reminder,
Mm.
then it's a mindset shift. So I
Yes.
hope that's helpful.
Yes, that's very helpful. So the body mind spirit approach like connects the body, mind, and the spirit together, making them a unit once more, not just walking mindlessly on something or ignoring your spiritual growth, for example. Is that right? Or it might. Mm.
It is, Toby. And where this emanated from, Descartes. Um, was he was born in 1596. I think he died in 1650. But what he did is he did many good things for us, but he also brought us what we call the body mind division,
Mm.
where before that period of time, we naturally saw the whole person. The Cartesian split, it's called the Cartesian split,
Mm.
brought us to this place of seeing the body as a machine divorced from the mind,
Mm.
right?
Yes.
And the body is the machine. It's also divorced from the spirit.
Mm.
What that did, unfortunately, is make us treat ourselves in a very separate way. Like, oh, this body, I can treat it however I want, and it doesn't affect my mind, and it doesn't affect my spirit. But we are very much, the body, mind, and spirit, they're inextricably intertwined.
Mm.
And when we even think about it, that the gut, the enteric nervous system, gives the brain 90% information. The
Mm.
brain only gives the gut 10% in that feedback loop.
Uh,
And when we think about that simple truth,
yes.
and we are taught, ignore your gut, go with your brain.
Mm.
Isn't that interesting? It's the
It
gut
is.
that's feeding a lot of information
Pushing
to
to
the
the
brain.
brain. Yeah.
Right. And so we want to, and here's the power when we divorce things, and that's why freedom was such a good example. My brain can tell me work 8 hours straight,
Mm.
see, or work 16 hours. Completely capable of working like 16 hours straight. I get super hyper focused, right? And I
Yeah.
can see client, client, client. But if we listen to the spirit and say, oh, that pup walked in to draw my attention to play.
Mm.
So I get out of my logical left brain that says, you can do this. And I get into my more creative, emotional, very important right brain that says, give yourself a break, go play with the pup. Right? And
Yes.
then in that break, I can choose my mindset to be grumpy that I was interrupted, or I can choose a mindset, a more spiritual mindset that says, what a lovely opportunity to
Mm,
be in a great place of gratitude. And notice how the spirit comes up when we move into gratitude
mm,
for this opportunity to maybe step outdoors, look at roses, whatever's going on outside.
yeah.
And so that's how, and so notice how in that simple break, I've actually also given my body a much needed respite to move, my eyes a chance to refocus.
Mhm.
And so I think that's the really important piece of the body, mind, spirit approach, that we
Approach.
pay attention to the feedback loops of how they're all working. And not one part is more important than the other. The left brain's not more important than the right.
Yes, yes, that's very true. And earlier,
Yes.
earlier you made mention of of fear, and fear is like a very powerful force that drives our life. Like even in the body, mind, spirit approach, fear also influences how we connect everything together. And that draws me to your first book that you wrote, Joy from Fear. And I was really captivated by what you wrote. I was checking the Amazon page, and you wrote, if you find yourself running away from fear, you are running in the wrong direction. Fear demands that we move towards it, face it, and hear its messages. When we fail to do this, the price is high. Chronic anxiety, sleeplessness, damaged relationships, skyrocketing pharmaceutical use, and more. So, how would you advise us to embrace and manage fear in order to become better people in life?
This is just one of my favorite topics because fear, we tend to think of get over your fear,
Mm,
get over it. No, 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 no. Fear, we have two types of fear. This is my paradigm. It's how, I work. We have two types of fear. Fear that is very helpful. The fear that says that dog is snarling at you or that bear is chasing you.
yes.
Handle the situation, you are being threatened.
Mm,
We also have fear that is destructive fear. Fear that works against us being our better selves,
mm,
that comes up as a threat response,
mm,
that makes us run away
mm,
from new situations that could make us grow. It makes us run away from connection with partner because of some old script that's running in our head.
mm,
It makes us afraid to ask for that job promotion when we know we deserve it, but we don't want the boss to get upset with. We don't want to rock the boat. It also arises in the realm of self growth when we think, oh, I better just stay in my lane. This place is good enough. This relationship is good enough. This hobby is good enough. But if we listen to fear, it has a message for us.
mm,
It will tell us, come toward me, look at me, see if there's a threat, and if there's not. And this will expand you as a human being. Move forward. Maybe move forward slowly. Always move forward mindfully, but move in the direction of your dreams. And when we use fear in that way, it becomes our friend. It becomes our friend because it becomes a guide to say, you're just talking about discomfort. That's
yeah,
all this is. It's a
yes.
new situation.
Mm,
It's uncomfortable, but you're tough. You're strong. You're resilient.
mm,
You can move through it.
mm,
And so that's what I love about fear is if we learn to dismantle it
mm,
to constructive fear, fear that's protecting us, keeping us safe. And it's often confusing, you know, sibling,
mm,
the constructive fear, because we can get the two confused.
yes.
Then we can move forward. And that's why one of the things I work with a lot is anxiety and
Mm,
stress.
mm,
So much anxiety, in fact, most of it, is because we're worried about something in the future that we can't even control.
mm,
And so we have these levels of anxiety that are running, running, running. Now remember, body is here too.
yes.
Body's going adrenaline, cortisol. And remember, these heightened levels of adrenaline and cortisol on an ongoing basis contribute to diabetes, heart disease, obesity, all sorts of physical issues. So we're seeing that body, mind, spirit approach. And then I'm not being present because with my spirit, with my essence, because I'm moving into the future to be anxious about something that generally is not a threat to me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, for example, many people will say, well, I'm anxious about work. Well, what are you anxious about? Oh,
Mm.
I don't really know. I just don't think I'm going to be good enough. Well, instead of putting that energy into worrying about not being good enough, put that energy into doing your best in the present moment. Or somebody might say, I'm worried about finances. I don't know if I can pay my bills. Well, okay, that's a very interesting, it's an important thing to be concerned with. But worry? Worry doesn't serve you. Anxiety doesn't serve you. If you don't think that you're able to pay your bills, instead of worry, which is non productive, anxiety, which is non productive, sit down, look at your bills, figure them out, see where you can rein it in. See, maybe you're so tight you can't rein it in anywhere else. Work on a payment plan, see if there's a way to get, some sort of loan or whatever it is. But you see how then you use your energy in a way that does help you
Mm. Yes.
instead of just wasting it on worry.
Mm.
And worry, I believe, is, and this isn't my idea, I can't remember where I heard it, but it really rang true to me, that worry is a form of prayer.
Mm.
And I never thought about it that way. But since I heard that, which was years ago, I realized when people don't understand that, I'll say, well, if I tell you, Toby, I'm going to worry about you. When we get off this podcast, I'm going to be worrying about you.
Oh,
Or if I say, Toby, when I get off this podcast, I'm going to be sending you blessings
that's better.
and prayers
Yeah.
and lots of healing light. Which would
Mm.
you prefer?
I love the healing lights and the prayers.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And so, of course, because then I'm sending you, and when I'm working, I always, here's one of them. I
Mm.
always have a candle, right? And this one's not burning right now, but it's generally burning.
Mm.
And to remind me to always be sending whoever I'm working with or will be working with or have been working with healing energy and love and light. Much better than sending worry out into the universe. It doesn't do
Yeah.
anything.
Yes. So how do you send this energy out? Like you just send words of prayer in your mind for them or to them or wishing them
Oh,
good. How do you do that?
yes. I usually, it's funny, I even do it during sessions, right? I'll feel myself, my eyes will just close for a minute, and then I'll
Mm.
just be saying, may you be healed. May you have strength. May you have resilience in your life.
Mm.
Something like that. And one of my favorite ancient blessings is this one. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be safe from inner and outer danger. May you be well in body, mind, and spirit. May you be truly happy and free.
Amen.
Amen. And that is an ancient, ancient blessing of loving kindness. It is
Mm.
one of my, go-tos. And when we offer that energy to ourselves and to others, it really centers us. Because
Yeah.
even if I worry about you, I'm draining myself. I'm
Yes.
right. I'm worrying. What am I worrying for? Right. If
Yeah.
I just turn that and take a mindset of, I'm going to send you loving kindness,
Mm.
even if, get this, even if it's somebody who's harmed you.
Mm.
And that can be a hard shift. I've been in that place where somebody has harmed me and you want to forgive, right? And
Yes.
it's like, oh, right? You just can't quite get there. And then when you shift it to, I'm going to offer you loving kindness and healing,
Mm.
it's a win win
True.
because I don't have resentment or lack of forgiveness stuck in me. And if that other person even gets a droplet of what I'm sending, they'll be a better person and they won't go and hurt other people.
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah, yes.
Yes.
But it's quite
Yes.
challenging, right? It's quite challenging when you are hot or when you've been, I don't know, insulted by someone to send
Mhm.
light and blessings to the person. But it takes a level of growth, personal growth, I guess, to do that.
Yes, it does, Toby. And as I remind people, we are all works in progress. We all have good days. We all have not so good days. And it's why I love yoga, right? It
Mm,
is not a perfect, it is a practice. We practice yoga. We
mm,
practice. And and as much as we try to do better every day and evolve and be kinder and more loving, there are times that we have little stumbles. And so it's just learn from the stumble, whatever caused it, and move forward the next day, just a slightly better version of yourself. And I think this takes me to, a really important piece. So many people are raised in environments where you're taught that a mistake is bad, that you're taught that you are bad if you make a mistake. I really shift this. That's very fear based, right? I'm very growth based. So when I make a mistake, and this is how I try and work with other people, look at the mistake, find the lesson. If you've hurt someone in the process, say, I'm very sorry. It's funny. I'll give an example. This morning, I said something to my husband, and I'm not a believer in sarcasm, right? I don't think it's a healthy dynamic. And I very much try and steer away from it. And I said something, and he says, honey, that felt sarcastic. And I thought, wow. And my first response was, no, honey, that wasn't response. No, that wasn't sarcastic because I'm not a generally at all sarcastic person.
mm,
And then I paused for a minute and I thought, I can actually see how he would see it that way.
mm,
I was being playful and curious in my head, but I could see how it came out that way. So I said, honey, I'm so sorry.
mm,
I can see how that struck you as being sarcastic, and I see that sarcastic edge to it, and I apologize. This
mm.
is where I was coming from, but I can see that I engaged in a way that I don't like you to engage with me, so I apologize. And then we move forward.
Yeah.
And when we do that, when we
Mm,
pause
mm,
to look at how did what I say or do affect another person, we're
mm,
flexing the muscle of empathy.
mm,
We're fl- and then when we take a healing action to apologize and really mean it,
yes.
and many people will apologize and go, oh yeah, sorry, your feelings are hurt, right? And that doesn't feel good really. But if we can actually step into the other person's shoes, we are growing ourselves.
Yeah.
And we're also growing with the other person, because then we're creating a bond of self responsibility and trust. And we're holding ourselves accountable for being kind people.
Mm,
And someone I love very dearly gave me a little, I'm looking at it, it's a Dalai Lama piece, and it says, my religion is very simple. My religion is kindness.
oh,
And I think if we strive to always come from a place of kindness as much as possible, we will be imperfect. We'll have our days where we're a little crotchety or irritable, but if we always try to come back to kindness, we can generally do it quite okay.
that's very true. That's very true. I really like the fact that you made the example of you and your husband, from what happened today. And I would love to talk about your upcoming book, Date Smart, where you talk about relationships in general, like, how to transform your relationship and love fearlessly. And
Mm.
so my first question actually will be, from your expertise, how can we, build up mindful communication skills with people we're in relationship with our friends, with our husbands, with our, with loved ones around us? How do we do that? How can we have this mindful and, mindful skills or mindful communication skills with people?
Oh, Toby, such a great question. One thing is
Yes.
to don't watch so much TV.
Mm,
Don't watch so many movies unless you're really engaging about the content afterward. Play more. Play more with your partner. Interact more. Give more eye contact. Be present. Do not multitask. During conversations, do not multitask. The myth of multitasking, and it is a myth, there's lots of research that shows it hampers all of our tasks. because we cannot be fully present. It's an oxymoron for me to think I can be talking to you and, texting at the same time. I'm not going to be present for either, right?
True.
It's the same with communication. If we show up as I'm doing today and you're doing for me,
Yeah.
saying, I'm here, I'm all in, let's go. No agenda, let's go.
Mm,
Let me hear what you have to say. Let me respond to it.
mm,
Let me be present. And if I get something wrong or get off course or confuse you, bring me back, right?
mm.
And
Yes.
if we enter a conversation like that, enter a relationship like that, of course, there will be relationships that are more superficial where somebody's meeting just to have, a drink or, just want to talk about dress colors or hair color or whatever it is. And that's
Yes.
absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But we can even be present for that. We
Mm,
can even be present to hear somebody as they're talking about mountain bikes or their yoga class or whatever it is. And so, what I really say is show up. Really just show up to be present. Whatever is out in the outer world, it's much like being with a child, isn't it? When we show up for a child and just sit with them and play with them, they feel loved. We feel loved. We feel connected. We lose that often as we age. Here's another piece. So I think that, and this is one of the more important pieces. So many times, people as they grow become wounded.
mm,
And as we have wounds in life, we let me get back for a minute. I believe that joy, you'll see where this is going.
mm,
Joy is one of our five emotions. And joy, I believe, also is always within us. That's why my first book was Joy from Fear.
mm,
Joy is always there. It's much like a little candle that's always burning. We're born with it. And as we move through life, it's in a little glass container. And sometimes so much soot builds on the container. So much soot, and we don't know how to wipe it off. We're not even taught how to wipe it off. We don't even think of wiping it off. And it builds up, and then we don't see our light anymore. And we want it always to be burning. So we're looking for happiness. We're looking for this pleasure, that pleasure. But what we need to do is turn inside and wipe that soot off. Wipe the soot. And that's the self growth, that's the self work. So, in relationship, if I've let my candle build up a lot of soot and you've let your candle build up a lot of soot, and we don't pay attention to where the soot came from, maybe people were cruel to me in relationships. Maybe you grew up in a family that was just perfect, right? And you're coming from a place of goodness and trust, and I'm coming from a place of fear. And I'll let you get just so close to me, and then I'll push you away. Happens a lot in relationships,
mm,
not consciously, and it's really where a lot of domestic violence and abuse comes from.
mm,
Not because people necessarily, although there are people who do this, but not that people necessarily want to hurt other people. They've just learned their joy, their life, their light is so covered with soot, so much pain, that they see other people as being pain causers.
mm,
And it's so sad. It's heartbreaking because I've witnessed, I've worked with partners where this is happening, and it's sad no matter what's happening, but sometimes it's tragic when you're watching two people and they both want to be loved, but they can't get there. There's just so much hate, so much, and it's just awful. And then it's also awful when you see one person who's deeply hurting and a partner who's healthy, who's coming and saying, "Let me love you.
mm.
Let me love you." And the other person's going, "Okay," right? Okay,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so that's where self growth comes in.
Mm,
If we learn how to dutifully wipe that candle, the soot off, right? Wipe
mm,
the soot off. That's the self work. Sometimes we need the support of a professional to do that.
mm,
Sometimes we do.
mm,
I certainly, one of the things I love about my master's program and my doctoral program, they require you to go through a lot of personal therapy, a lot. And my
wow.
doctoral program required a lot.
Mm,
Absolutely, they should.
mm,
Why? Because when I'm working with a client, I don't want my unhealed wounds right, coming in and affecting the client.
Of course, of course.
No. And even with all the work I've done, if something comes up for me, I've become so good that I go, that's here. That's right. My piece is here. Let's put it over there.
Hmm.
And then, later on, maybe go for a walk, understand why that came up, work on it, resolve it, consult if you need to consult.
Yeah.
But you learn to do that. You learn to take that and pluck it and put it over here.
Hmm.
And so we can also do that. You don't need to be a clinical psychologist to learn that quality. That's the piece where being in somebody else's shoes, taking our issue and going, oh, this is happening for me. I'm feeling like my example with my husband this morning.
Yes.
Oh, I can take myself out of this, observe myself, see that that could have been taken as sarcasm. Absolutely.
Hmm.
It wasn't meant that way,
Hmm.
but I could absolutely see it from his perspective. If I step out of myself, I
Yes.
could see me saying, I forget what it was about. It was something from childhood. And I was like, oh, I didn't have that experience as a child. I wasn't in that realm.
Yeah.
And I could see how he took that, felt sarcastic. And
Hmm.
I've worked with him very hard on learning how his sarcasm affects me. Right. And so for
Yes.
him to point that out made me go, wow, what
Hmm.
a gift that he's become so good at avoiding sarcasm that I think that's probably the second time in our entire relationship he's called me on something like that. Right.
Hmm.
Because I try and stay aware. But if I slip up, I really try to go, oh, there it is. Is that helpful? That it's
Yes.
just such a process that we have to, if we're in relationship, so many people don't want to say, I'm sorry. So
That.
many people don't want to say, oh, my mistake. What's the problem? To
Hmm.
me, if I make an error, it's a growth opportunity.
Hmm.
If I just say, now, not sorry for the sake of sorry, but because an empty apology is often worse than no apology at all.
Yes.
But if I pause to say, Toby, I apologize for hurting your feelings. Please tell me more about what I did. You may say, well, you called me goofy,
Hmm.
and goofy is a charged word for me. It
Hmm.
doesn't feel good. I connect it with XYZ.
Hmm.
Then I'll go, oh. And that's actually an experience that taught me. I called someone goofy, and to me, goofy is like goofy. And this person did not like it and said, don't call me goofy. And I said, I'm so sorry. Tell me more. I think of Goofy as like a Disney, Goofy, the dog in Disney, Goofy.
Yeah.
And he said, no, my dad would call me Goofy and be really mean to me about it. I said,
Hmm.
oh, I am so sorry. So then I knew in the future to, especially with that individual, be very careful with words that may not be charged for me. And we are all have words that are charged for us that may not be charged for someone else because of our childhood experiences. Because each one of us has walked through life such a different path. And that's why if we show up for our friends and really listen, we can learn so much about that other person's world. We have, it's just extraordinary to me that if we really tune into someone, you and I were chatting a little bit before the podcast, and I could have gone on with you for hours
Hmm.
because you live in a different world than I do. And if I dive into that space, I learn about Toby. I don't know much about you except that you're an electrical engineer, that you have a girlfriend, that you're very passionate about life and love and friendships and soul work. And I can go into that space with you for weeks, right?
Yes.
How amazing to me that people let us into that world. And so I think if we approach communication from that vantage point, that it's a privilege. If somebody wants to talk with us, what a privilege.
That would be great. That would be awesome, actually. That's very great. But relationship consists of different people of different walks of life, like you made mention of like different experiences, different backgrounds. So how do we set a realistic and mindful, expectation for this kind of relationship that we get into?
Such a good question, Toby, that when if we go back to date smart,
Mm.
and that book and that's coming out, I really come from a place, regardless of gender, that we have a responsibility to know who we are, not be perfect. It's not about being perfect. It's about knowing who I am right here, right now, and what I want from a relationship. Do I want, if I'm single, right? Do I want to stay single? Do I want to be partnered? Do I want a long term partnership? Right? What do I want? What are my values? How am I? Do I want just a hookup? And I'm not judging any of that. I'm saying I need to know what I really want. So if I come again, whether I'm a man or a woman, regardless of gender, if I come to the table and say, this is who I am, this is what I'm looking for, how honest is that? How respectful is that? And then in that interchange, if we are both being authentic, the person, if I'm saying, oh, I only am seeking marriage, and the other person says, oh, I just want to hook up, we can go, oh, two ships passing in the night, see you later, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if I'm saying I want marriage, and that person says, who really wants a hookup, says, oh, I want marriage too,
Mm,
it's based on dishonesty.
true.
So if we just show up and say, this is who I am, and so many problems, again, I don't really see gender differences here. I see it being very gender neutral, that it's really about, and I'm big on friendship. If we create, aside from people who just want to hook up, that's, its own segment, and no judgment there. But if you want a relationship, build a friendship.
Mm,
Build a friendship, because if you build a friendship, even if the romance goes aside after the limerence stage of a relationship, the honeymoon stage, you will have a friendship. And
yeah.
that friendship can always reignite, not always, but often the passion can be reignited. And if it's not reignited, you still have a friendship.
Mm,
You still have someone that you met that you can really respect. So many relationships are not built on friendships.
mm,
And
yeah.
so I really come from a place of, regardless of what it is you want, know it, be honest about it, show up and treat others the way you would like to be treated. And so I talk in Date Smart about things like ghosting, right? And it's such a big issue in the dating world, those and, all of the other ones like breadcrumbing or, whatever the current
Terms are.
phrases are, right, for disrespectful behavior.
Mm, mm,
And really, what it boils down to is if you are ghosting someone, you're causing harm.
mm,
And you can shift that harm very quickly with one text that says, thank you for your time. I'm moving in another direction. And then with that simple, and I've even said, if you're the kind of person who really likes to move through relationships, keep that as a little text to yourself, cut and paste and give it to the person, one after the other, right? Then you're no longer, you're a ghoster. You're somebody who simply shows up and says, hey, I like to move through relationships quickly. I'm not the kind of person who wants something long term. You hook up with someone, you send a text the next day that says, hey, move it on. You've done everything that you've shown up and said you were going to do.
true.
You've shown up, you've done what you wanted to do, you've sealed it so that the other person can have peace of mind and move forward.
Mm. Yeah, that's very true. So how do you set like healthy and strong boundaries in relationships? So let's say you
Mm.
advance with the relationship, for example, and you are building up friendship or you are building up something, you are going towards somewhere. How do you build up these, boundaries?
Okay. That takes us, Toby, back to the piece of self-awareness.
Mm,
And that's actually where I start Date Smart from, is getting to know who you are. Because if I know my values, for example, few of my values, integrity, respect, kindness, transparency,
mm,
gratitude, generosity, those are some of my core values, right?
yeah, yeah,
And if I show up and say to someone, these are my values,
mm,
what are your values? And they say, my values are getting as much out of life as I can, using people, trampling on the earth. And I'm going to go, not a good fit.
mm,
But maybe I'll meet up with someone who tells me their values match my values.
mm,
And then maybe they do, and the relationship ends off great, right?
mm,
maybe they lied to me and they just are saying that so they can get into my world. That happens a lot, right? Then I need to pay attention to red flags. So, when the red flag comes up when somebody says, "Oh, I'm a kind and loving and generous person," they're with you and they're criticizing you, or they're criticizing other people,
mm,
or they're throwing trash on the ground, whatever it is that's happening. And you go, wow, this isn't adding up. Or they
yeah,
call people names, or they're judgmental. All of these red flags are going up. Here's boundaries. I pay attention to the red flags. I go back to my values and say, this isn't working for me.
mm,
You and I had this agreement that this is, and I think I'm missing something here because your idea of being respectful doesn't seem to align with mine.
yeah,
And so we might not be a good fit.
mm,
And so then that person has the opportunity to go their own way or to come into my world and share my boundaries, share my life and respect my boundaries.
yeah,
Does that make sense? So when we use boundaries, boundaries are different in every relationship. So
mm,
in a new friendship, we may have very strict boundaries,
mm,
keeping somebody at a distance, and that would be healthy.
mm,
And then as we get to know someone, our boundaries become a little more permeable and we let them in, and then they can touch us or kiss us or, we have sex or whatever it is that we wouldn't do with somebody else.
mm,
And where boundaries get difficult is when one or both people are not clear on what those needs are. I have married people who will say, my husband comes by all the time and he's whacking my butt. Some women would love that.
yeah,
They'd love that their partner to do that.
mm,
In some situations, the woman's saying it feels like constant sexual assault. Different boundaries,
mm,
right? So the
yes,
woman who doesn't want her butt patted in her marriage, we don't generally want people to pat our butts out on the street. That would be a serious boundary violation.
yeah,
But in a marriage, you could see where it would also feel for someone who's doesn't like that. Then it becomes, wait a second, honey, I love you dearly. Please don't pat my butt. It just makes me feel like an object or whatever's going on.
mm,
So it is about knowing our boundaries so that we can state our boundaries.
yeah,
And then after stating our boundaries, enforce our boundaries. And I'm kind of like a three strikes person that if you cross my boundary and it's not too big of a violation, I'll say, you crossed my boundary there. Let me be really clear on what it is. Maybe you don't know me well enough to know how clear it is.
mm,
The person does it again, I say, cross my boundary. Here it is, right? And if they do it again, then I'm likely to say, this isn't working for me. It sounds like you and I have very different boundary needs. So, you know, this is what will have to happen. So then there's the
yes,
natural consequence.
oh,
It generally doesn't even get to three strikes because as we become more self aware, we become clearer about our boundaries.
mm,
And then we also, if somebody crosses my boundary, this is the part of mindfulness we were talking about.
yeah,
I will spend time looking at what occurred so
mm,
that the next time I'm clearer
yeah,
with myself and with the other person. And I think that's the important piece is after an interaction occurs, people often move on very quickly to something else.
mm,
And I think we, as a practice, not to come back and relive something negative
mm,
ever, to relive what we would have done differently,
yes,
to
yes,
use it as a learning opportunity to say, oh, I don't really like how I showed up that way.
mm,
I wonder how could I show up differently next time that would make me feel better about me?
mm.
Because we can't control the other person, but we can control how we show up.
That's very true. That's very, very true. And in a relationship, for example, or friendship with other people, is it the room to make adjustments? For example, say, okay, these are my values. Actually, I love you so much, but because you see things a different way, I'm going to try to adjust myself, or I don't know, make some room for you to be my space in my life, making some sacrifices, also compromises, or something like that.
It's such a good question. And I'm giving you a sneak peek, Toby, into my fourth book, the manuscript I'm working on right now.
Awesome.
And I really focus on that in there. And one word in the title of that book is imperfect.
Hmm.
And so what I really like to believe is that we have two types of values: our essential core values
Mm.
and our general values.
Mm.
Our essential core values tend to be like oxygen, like we need them.
Yes.
And so for you, in the piece you're talking about in a friendship,
Mm.
one of your essential values may be respect, may be honesty, right?
Yes.
Maybe integrity. So if a friend is disrespectful, lacks integrity, dishonest with you, you may say, you're not really my friend, and no, this isn't going to work.
Mm.
But if it's a general value that's just something more flexible, like, a love for travel, or a love for maybe somebody's a little bit different with finances than you are, a little bit different with food or drinking than you are.
Yeah.
Those are more flexible. And then we might say, oh, absolutely. That's just your way of being. You be you, you be me. But I think in general, with our essential values, they tend to be a little less flexible in nature
Mm.
because they're our oxygen.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yes. So we can make
Yeah.
we can only compromise on things that are much more flexible for us, on our flexible values.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I think those are the ones, again, where when we meet up with someone
Mm.
and we're forming a relationship,
Mm.
we often don't look at our values.
Yeah.
And we think, oh my God, that person's so hot. Or, they have a great car or this or that. And we're like, oh, great fit.
Yeah.
And we go by this, and we also go by this.
Mm.
What values ask us to do is go left brain, right brain, and heart,
Mm.
to know that. And I have many friends whose values are different than mine in various ways, but it's so interesting that they are all generally very honest, respectful, loyal people.
Wow.
Right. And so I think as long as you have core values, you don't get quite off, set off. I think that so many things that happen when we get misaligned are because our core values. And when you look at things like, women feeling harassed, it's because their core value of respect.
Yes.
Or a man being harassed, right?
Mm.
We don't like our core value of respect. For people who value respect,
Mhm.
uh-uh. It will set people off
Yeah.
that one's pretty non-negotiable.
That's very true. Yeah. That's very, very
Yeah,
true.
and so when we're going out on dates, and I work with a lot of people who are dating, they'll meet someone who's just, they'll say, oh my God, the most handsome guy or the prettiest girl I've ever met. But
Mhm.
then when they start going out on dates, the girl will be flirting with other guys, or the guy's eyes will be going around the room.
Yeah.
And that feels like a deal breaker. Why? Because of the lack of
Value.
respect it's
Mm.
showing. Yes. Or someone who really wants to get married, being with somebody, that's like a core value: marriage, family, happily ever after. And
Yes.
somebody who's a bachelor or a bachelorette and they value that.
Mm.
Those are so different
Yeah. Very different.
that unless one of them has a major shift, and usually that doesn't happen, it's not going to pan out well in the long run. And you even think, I don't know Bill or Melinda Gates, right? But they're divorcing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it appears from the very little I've read that they both have very good work ethics,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Both very aligned in that way, both aligned in being philanthropic and good people.
Mm.
It doesn't sound like they're aligned on the core value of prioritizing relationship.
Ah.
And so while they stayed together to raise the kids, and this
Yes.
often happens at that magic age when the last one leaves for college, the
Mm.
partners look at each other and go, oh, we aren't aligned on relationship.
Yeah.
One of us prioritizes it more, or we haven't maintained it. And so I think, and then you take people who, my publisher, the owner of the publishing company,
Yeah.
has been in a very long term marriage, and he loves his wife so much, and they have many, many children, right?
Mhm.
And they so prioritize family.
Mm.
It's actually the Familius is the publishing company name,
Yes. Yes.
and they are just gorgeous together.
Mm.
Because of that, they share many key values.
Mm.
And not only do they share them, they live them.
Yeah.
And so it's not that any value in my mind is right or wrong or better or worse. It's about being more aligned on the core ones. And I think if we move into relationships in that way, not judging it. So two people who, let's say, they really value sex and they just want a relationship based on sex,
Mm,
and that's enough for them because they also value work.
mm,
So if they both value work and sex, and those are their two core values, they're generally going to get along pretty well.
mm.
They go to work, they come home, have sex. They go to work, they come home, have sex. They'll be fine, right?
True, very
But
true.
if
Yeah.
one of those people values work and sex, and the other one values self growth and sexual intimacy
Oh, that's
and work,
a
not
mismatch.
going to be a no,
Mm,
no. The one thing they'll really have in common is work.
true.
But on the home front, the intimacy piece will leave the other person feeling quite starved.
That's horrible. That's sad. That sounds very sad.
Isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's one of the privileges of my job is that I get to be inside of people's lives and see how much sadness there is.
Yeah.
And so much of it is because of misaligned
Mm.
core values.
True. And one thing that happens through this is, for example, depression or traumas, or
Mhm.
also possibly anxiety. And I understand that you work with people that go through these experiences in life. So what's like one advice you give someone out there who is going through depression at this moment, or anxiety or trauma from any kind, relationship or
Oh,
whatever?
goodness.
Mhm.
Well, first I'd say read Joy from Fear.
Yeah.
Because the way I design my books, Toby, knowing that many people cannot afford therapy,
Mm.
I design my books to be read, but also to be workbooks.
Oh, that's great.
So that because many people can't afford or access therapy,
Mm.
and therapy rates are very high often and can be not affordable. And so it's one of the reasons I wrote Joy from Fear, to allow people to have a book that they can read at their own pace.
Yeah.
And if they can access psychotherapy, it can be used in addition with psychotherapy. It can also be used for a group. If
Mm.
you have a group and you all share one copy, but it has to be a safe group, or if you're doing solo work, here's why. Especially in America, we value psychopharmacology.
Yeah.
So, and that's being a very general we. I do not traditionally value psychopharmacology because I think that it is masking many problems.
Mm.
It is much cheaper for insurance companies, and definitely a boon for drug companies, to throw a bottle of pills at somebody for $40 a month than spend, you know, $200 a session or 150, whatever it is, on a therapist for a year, four times, a month for a year. It's
Yes.
obviously more beneficial to them to have somebody just pop a pill.
Mm.
But that to me is much like having somebody have a bullet wound and the bullet's lodged inside them,
Yeah.
and you put a band-aid over it. You don't take out the bullet, you put a band-aid over it, and you
Yes.
say, here, just take some antibiotics. That'll help you. Well, no, we're not removing the bullet. So what I tell people, you're talking about three very different things. Trauma is trauma.
Mm.
Trauma is a wound or wounds that still live in the body, mind, and spirit.
Mm.
And in my life, I know what that's like. I've experienced trauma, and it takes significant work to move through and heal from. It is its own class. And
Mm.
it deserves. I'm also an EMDR therapist, and EMDR is one of the best ways to heal trauma. And it's not the only way, mind you. And so trauma is its own thing. So whether somebody has been raped, has been a victim of domestic violence, has been a victim in a robbery, a a fire, anything traumatic, it generally needs work
Mm.
because it is stored in the body and the brain and the soul in a very different way. It stays fresh. I call it that it stays. You can generally know you've experienced trauma and are suffering from trauma if something is living in you in a painful way that feels like it happened yesterday.
Hmm.
where it can just at a sound or a smell, you're taken back to the past.
Yeah.
Right?
Hmm.
That means those memories were not properly stored by the brain because the brain was in a hyper aroused state at the time. That is why our veterans, right, who come back from wars and they're shoved into society and told just get on with your life.
Hmm.
No, they're filled with trauma.
Hmm.
They hear, a car or, a doorbell and they jump.
Yeah.
Hypervigilance, hyper startle response, right?
Hmm.
So that's its own thing. And I do give some information in Joy from Fear about trauma.
Hmm.
And so you can do some self-healing work with trauma, but you often need the support of a professional. But there's a lot in Joy from Fear on that. So for anxiety, overgeneralizing here, but anxiety is generally what we talked about earlier. Fear of the future, fear
Hmm.
of the future, something in the future,
Hmm.
something in the future. So Joy from Fear focuses a lot on that and how to unwind that. So
Hmm.
just some overviews. If you're suffering from anxiety or depression, these work for both. Learn to pause, learn to breathe. And I give an outline of breathing exercises, right? But breathing, here's an example of one. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you're anxious, or you're on an airplane and you're anxious, this is one of my favorites. Imagine a little pin dot right there in the center of your forehead, right?
Hmm.
And as you breathe in, imagine the pin dot getting bigger, as big as you want. And as you breathe out, drawing your belly to your spine, imagine the pin dot getting smaller again.
Hmm.
Breathe in, pin dot gets bigger. Breathe out, belly to spine, pin dot gets smaller. So that's one of the kinds of breathing that can actually, what does it do? It brings you to the present.
Yeah.
Your mind, your monkey mind can't be going because you're focusing on this little pin dot.
Yes.
You're bringing on your parasympathetic nervous system and you're down regulating your body from an anxious state to a calm state.
Hmm.
So you're actually relaxing your body and your mind and you're bringing your spirit to center. So those are some examples. The other thing that I tell people is to pay attention to scents. And actually, during our podcast, I just used it. I had lavender oil
Ah, yeah.
and
Yeah.
keeping a scent by you. Not that I'm anxious, but I do like the feel of it as
Hmm.
well as the smell, and having scents around you that are soothing.
Hmm.
Or a candle, something that allows you to remember your physical body,
Yeah.
to bring you out of head space and into body space and spirit space. And something as simple as lavender, rose oil, chamomile tea,
Hmm.
remembering that our body wants to be cared for,
Yes.
especially in my profession where I'm caring for others.
Yes.
Often giving to myself in that simple way of putting lavender oil on my hands. And I didn't do that on purpose, but it's an example
Hmm.
of what I do.
Hmm.
It is one of my ways of giving to myself,
Yes.
of saying, okay, here's something that feels good to you too, right? So if we do that, whether we are a boyfriend, a father, a girlfriend, a mother, a writer, a fireman, whatever, you're an electrical engineer, having ways where you pause and say, I appreciate Toby.
Hmm.
I'm going to give Toby a cup of tea. I'm going to give Toby a nice forward fold yoga stretch, right? Giving yourself these little gifts that truly matter, because we get so focused on the external gifts. We can give ourselves lots of good gifts, right?
Very
That are
true.
very simple.
Hmm.
So that's a helpful way to address anxiety. Depression is often, and again, an overgeneralization, is often, whereas anxiety is based on forward looking fear, depression is often the result of being mired in the past,
Hmm.
of getting stuck in old wounds, old hurts, lack of forgiveness. I have also noticed, interestingly enough, that many people who are depressed have suffer from unresolved anger issues.
Hmm.
And not all of them, mind you, but some people who are very depressed have suffered, a great deal of hurt in life, and they haven't been able to process it. They haven't been seen or heard. And so they get, and this isn't all depression, right? Because some depression is definitely a result of an imbalance in neurochemicals and something within the system. But in many cases, it's the result of unprocessed grief or anger, something that has gotten stuck again in the body, mind, and spirit. Because our bodies experience, if somebody's yelling at me, it's one of my least favorite things. I don't
Mm,
like to be yelled at. I don't like people swearing at me. My body experiences it.
mm,
Yes, my brains experience it, but I feel it because I'm an empath, right? So
yes.
people who are more empathic, it's wonderful because we can feel other people. We can give, we can nourish, we can be compassionate, but it doesn't turn off. We can
Mm,
learn to have good boundaries around it. But if somebody's yelling at a child or, screaming in traffic, we will feel it. And then we have to go, oh, okay, put up a boundary around that.
mm,
So I think that depression is its own piece that we need to honor as something that needs to be investigated and healed and not judged. Anyone who has an issue, whether it's a substance abuse issue or marital issues, I just have such great compassion
mm,
because, you know, life is tough. And sometimes we don't have all the tools that we need. And when we don't have the tools or we feel judged by other people or feel like we're broken, um, it makes things only worse.
yeah.
And so being able to be there for friends who are suffering and be there for ourselves and reach out for support when necessary.
Mm,
And I'm a big believer, my goodness, in the power of groups. So going back to, bibliotherapy, using books to
mm,
heal. I believe that the power of a good self-help book when used in a book club with a good leader, or I think that absolute transformation can be done. I just actually ended it because my time got very, very impacted. I had run a women's support group for 10 years, and I look at myself as more of a guiding light. I don't heal people, people heal themselves.
yeah.
I'm present to offer guidance, but
Mm,
I can't heal anyone. They have to want to be healed. And
mm,
then I just get the privilege of guiding them
yeah.
and witnessing this amazing evolution.
Mm,
And so, what you see when you do group work, that the presence, the circle, the being present for other people, hearing their stories,
mm,
and saying, oh my goodness, I see myself in that. Or I don't see myself in that, but I'm there for you, is healing in itself. And I think that that's why so many of our ancestors had circles. They gathered
yes.
in circles.
Communities, yeah.
Community
Yeah.
and knitting circles, baking circles, talking circles, sharing circles, being
Mm,
in circles where there is safety and trust and community is healing in itself. So um, I think that if we take a very soul based approach to offering healing to the world, it's one of the things I love to do. I just find it magnificent to be with a group of people and to be able to be a light to offer healing, which is one of the reasons I enjoy podcasts, because if I only touch one
yes.
life, what a wonderful use of my time, right? Just
Yes.
one life. And if I happen to touch more than one life, oh my goodness, how blessed, how lucky was I,
Yes,
right?
yes, that's true. Yes. And for the listeners out there who would love to, get in contact with you, like to work with you to get your, therapeutic services that you offer, or to, work with you to get some healing or some consultancy or something, or some, I don't know,
Okay.
whatever, or advocacy. There are a lot of things you offer, actually, like a list of things one can get from you. What's the best way of getting in contact with you to, yeah, to work
So
with you?
I my website is drcarlamanly.com, and it's Carla, Carla, Manly, Manly, and you can reach me through drcarlamanly.com. And even though my private practice is incredibly full and we're limited to anybody in the health field is limited to working in their area,
Mm,
I do um, especially with Date Smart coming out, I'll be doing a master class on Date Smart. And
Awesome.
I will, if somebody in their area wants to organize a class around Joy from Fear or Date Smart, I
Mm.
absolutely just so love diving into new projects that
Mm.
somebody wants me to lead,
Yes.
because just like today, very organic, not scripted,
Mm.
that is how I think we all work best. If
Mm.
I lead from what I want to teach,
Yes.
it's not nearly as effective as if I show up and offer what others need.
Mm.
And then, clearly I love dogs, but I sometimes think of myself like a little hound dog. We once had a red bone coon hound. And that if I'm present for people like
Mm.
a hound dog, sniffing and following what they need,
Mm.
then I'm being of service. And that's what I feel like I'm here to do,
Yeah.
is to be of service.
Yes, I'm going to place all your information in the show notes for this episode. So I'm encouraging everyone to click on the links, get your books, and also get in contact with you to benefit more from you. And one thing I would love to also say is that your book Date Smart is coming out July 6th on Amazon. I saw the date on July 6th.
Yes.
So I'm looking forward to that already, and I'm hoping that everyone will pick up the book, pre-order it, and yeah, read a copy of the book and transform your relationships and your love fearlessly. And also, one book we didn't talk about actually is because we've run out the time we spent a lot of a lot of time talking about the other two books and a lot of interesting things that have been blessed by already from you. I'm so thankful for that. I'm so grateful for everything I've learned from you. One book we didn't talk about was Aging Joyfully. Like,
Aging Joyfully,
yes.
such a great book. And even though the title says it's for women 50 and older,
Mm.
that was a marketing issue, that the publisher had to handle. But I believe we live in a world where I've had clients as young as 23 tell me they're no longer relevant and that they're old.
Mm.
And Aging Joyfully is actually a book to me for anyone who's over 18,
Mm.
because not only does it address physical issues, simple things like the importance of wearing sunscreen so that you prevent skin cancer, but it's really, as are all my books, it is about loving yourself from the inside out. And
Yes.
so Aging Joyfully also really asks people to look at ageism, age of the self, which is, self ageism is looking at yourself at 25, 35, 45, 55 and saying,
Mm.
I'm no longer relevant. Somebody younger is going to come in and replace me. That can
Mm.
happen to us at any age. So it's about noticing when that's happening from the
Mm.
inside or from the outside and
Mm.
moving into it,
Mm.
not running away from it, but saying, wow, I don't want to be a part of a world where I'm afraid of moving into maturity. Older societies, and when we look at myth, very much about the young woman, the virgin, the maiden, and the old crone. And the old crone, our society looks at as being an ugly old witch. Crone, my goodness, is wisdom. That's
Yes.
wisdom. And
Mm.
you can be 25 and have crone energy, the
Mm.
old soul energy, and you
Yeah.
can be 85 and not have it.
Mm.
So for me, it is about developing that sense of being able to access the child within ourselves. She's the playful one. That's the one that freedom grabs and says, let's go play, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, and by the way, freedom appears in Date Smart. It's one of the most wonderful little surprises, and he's also on the back cover. Um,
Uh,
but anyway, so back to Aging Joyfully. So when we look, that those are parts of who we are,
mm.
and so many old fairy tales are actually based on that. We have sanitized and romanticized fairy tales, but they're really about getting to know all the parts of yourself. So for a young man, the myth is men peak at 18, right?
Mm.
No. My goodness, I've known men who have old crone energy, right? Their old crone energy at 18, 19. And I've unfortunately known people in their 60s and 70s who have no wisdom at all. And so aging joyfully is about embracing all of this beauty that's inside of you, all of this potential, not being afraid of aging, but saying, my goodness, if you paid me to go back to be 18 again, no, you couldn't give me $1 billion. To
Mm,
have to live through all of that again? No, I have learned way too much. And it
mm,
has come hard, right? So if
yes.
we look at our lives that way and say, wait a second, my journey is a treasure. It is a sacred treasure.
Mm,
And if you want to come and walk with me, no matter how old you are, that's why I get along well with any age. I get along well with
mm,
any age because I feel ageless. I
mm,
can be 18. I can move into a space and be with a 90-year-old.
mm.
Everybody has something to teach me,
Yes. That's
even
the
my pup, especially my pup.
yeah, yeah. I love that actually. That's the way to look at it, being ageless. Like not bracketing yourself into this age group and say, okay, I'm 25, I have to do this, I achieve this, I have to be this smart or less smart, or I have to, have this kind of wisdom or this acquisition already at this age or at this point in my life. But loving
Abs-
yourself with the age, yeah, yeah.
Love yourself and be in tune. You made me think when I was in college, undergrad, my friends would have to pull me out of my room, pull
Mm,
me,
mm,
because I was not a partier, just not interesting for me. I was like an old soul at a young age.
mm,
So there is that piece where knowing who you are, and I didn't know then what that meant. I just knew I was different,
mm,
that I wasn't interested in fraternities or sororities. And there's that piece that if we look, just as you said, regardless of the age you are, drop into it and try to know who you are, what your needs are, and honor them and allow people to come in and
yes.
pull you out in ways that feel good to you, that broaden your horizons,
Mm,
not in ways that make you lose who you are. And that's a very subtle difference, isn't it?
yes.
So if somebody comes in and says, let's go river rafting, I go, that's a little out of my comfort zone, but when are we going? Right?
Yeah.
When are we going?
Yes.
So that's, as long as we have life rafts, we'll be okay.
Hmm. And that's true. Wow, I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful for everything I've been able to learn from you today. Like, I'm really sorry. I'm so sorry for taking extra from your time already.
It's been a blessing.
I'm so
Toby, it's
grateful.
been a joy. It's
Yeah.
been a joy. And I look forward to connecting with you again. Thank you to you. Thank you to your listeners.
Thank you so much. And I really wish you all the best, and also um wish you, much more love and much more light as you spread love and light to other people and help other people's life.
And I wish the same for you.
Thank you so much.
Namaste. Take good
Wow.
care, Toby.
Same to you. Bye.
Bye bye.